Greetings hobbyists, this is armoured, and in this video we're going to be having a look at the answers to how to create this sci-fi shoulder pad. Now this was the second challenge that I put out, and this was quite difficult because it had some very specific dimensions that you're meant to add to it. If you haven't had a go at that, or you want to have a go at it before you see me going through how to create this, please do have a look at the link in the description and in the top right hand corner so you can have a look at that challenge. And you can always come to this video later or just use it to fix or look up a certain part that you need to see how to do. So let's get straight on with this, and I'm going to delete this to start with. Now I did say I was going to talk about how to do this both using just add-ons native to Blender and without, and that is going to be true. So there are going to be bits where I'm going to be doing both, and you might just sort of skip forward a little bit, but I would suggest you have a look at both. That way you might learn something new, which is always really useful, and there are times you might want to do things without using a paid for add-on. And one of these examples is going to be right now at the beginning, though I will say this actually add-on isn't paid for, it's one of the ones that's free, and I will highlight where they are paid for or not. So we need to start with a sphere, and the obvious option is to come in and just bring in a sphere like an icosphere. But this has problems. It has a horrible mesh at the top where you can see this here, and this, where it comes to this very specific point, can cause a lot of problems, so we do not want to use that. So straight away I'm going to delete that. That is not useful. Instead we want to use something called a quad sphere. Now if you've got machine tools, and I really do recommend you get machine tools, it is free, you will have an option here that says quad sphere. Now this automatically comes in with 4 subdivisions, and you'll see if I go into vertex mode, all of this sphere is made up of quads, and you don't have this horrible bunching at the top. Now I pretty much always use this for anything that I start off with as a sphere. It gives a much nicer sphere, and especially for 3D printing, it's going to cause a lot less problems. But in this instance, actually I'm not going to use this, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm just going to G and X and move that out the way. Instead, I'm going to show you how to make a quad sphere from scratch in case you don't have machine tools, but importantly, this is actually the way to go overall, in my opinion, for a shoulder pad. So let's go into object mode and let's do this the right way, at least for this instance. So I'm going to bring in a cube. I'm going to press S to make it a lot larger, just so it's a bit easier to see on screen, and I'm going to subdivide this. We could just go into here to add modifiers, but instead I'm going to press Control, and then you can press any number up to and including 5, and that will give that number of subdivisions. So that's a nice quick way of doing that. Now you will notice that if I go into side-on view, that actually this isn't a proper sphere. It's slightly, well, a little bit more square, and we can fix this. And normally if you don't have machine tools, this is what I would do. All you do is go to add modifier, and we want to add a cast, and this is automatically set to sphere, and you want to change this factor up to 1. Now you can see, or hopefully you saw, that changed it, but if I just come and turn this on and off, that is without the cast. Slightly more squared, that is with the cast. Now I would always recommend to do that, and you can just apply all, with this one exception. I actually find that we get better looking shoulder pads with a better shape if we don't have this perfectly spherical, so I'm actually going to leave that cast off. I'm going to leave it at 5 levels of subdivision. In fact, actually, I'm going to put that up to 6, just because I know my computer can handle it. If yours can't, you can leave it on 5 or 4, and I'm going to apply that. Next, I want to get the basic shape for this. I'm going to delete that out at this point because hopefully it's demonstrated that we want a slightly different shape. And I'm going to come into side view, and I'm going to start deleting some vertices. So I've gone into X-ray mode, so non-X-ray mode, Shift and Z to get into X-ray mode, and I'm just going to delete out all of the vertices to leave me with a quarter. And I'm going to use Z-axis and Y-axis points to help with that. So let's delete out those vertices, and let's delete out these. And importantly, you'll notice I'm leaving the ones that are centered on that line for both the Y-axis and the Z-axis. It's going to give us a nice flat bottom and back to our shoulder pad. Let's delete those and back into object mode, and Shift and Z out of X-ray mode. So at this point it's looking, well, not very shoulder pad like. I guess it could be a shoulder pad, depends on the shape you want, but we want something that's a little bit more specific in dimensions, and we've got those specific sizes to get matched to. Now the first thing I'm going to do is press N to bring up my N panel, and we'll see that the scale is all messed up here. And we've got our dimensions at the side, so let's get those fixed. In fact, these are quite big, so let's get these sorted. So the first thing I want to do is sort my dimension in the Z-axis, so that is meant to be 8.5 tall. Then we want it coming out this way, which is in the y-axis. That is meant to be 5.5. And then finally, on my x-axis, we're meant to have this as 10. So we've got this shape now that's looking much more correct to what we want. And importantly, I'm going to press Ctrl and A and apply the scale. We always want to apply the scale with very few exceptions. Now let's deal with the thickness of this. And the easiest, quickest way of doing this is just with a solidify modifier. So add modifier, solidify, and at this point I want to add in my offset, which we've said is going to be 1.6. Now, this is why we had to do the scale. If we hadn't done this, this 1.6 wouldn't actually be 1.6 Blender units. It would be affected by the scale, and therefore this would make this inaccurate. So we've got to have applied the scale for that. And I don't really need to do anything with this, so I'm just going to apply it. Now at this point, I want to deal with this inset, essentially making the trim on the shoulder pad. But I've got a big problem here, and I'm going to do this wrong to begin with. I'm going to use box cutter to show this to begin with, and then I'll do it without box cutter, so I will cover both. But if I just press Alt and W to activate box cutter, so I'm going to come here, bring in my box, come side on to do that. I'm going to press I to inset it, and I'm going to press Tab so that I can freeze that in place and I can fiddle with it. In fact, I might as well just hit enter and leave that there just so I can demonstrate the problem. So straight away, this is going to cause a problem in that it's also going to inset this inside section as well. And there's not a really good way to deal with this. If I was doing this in vertex mode, then what I could do is actually hide these vertices and it won't affect that. Unfortunately, Booleans don't have things where we can set it to just affect certain vertices, so we can't put in vertex groups. So that's not going to work. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to delete those two as well, just so we don't get messy. So how am I going to fix that? Well, if I just press W to get out of box cutter, whether I'm doing this with box cutter or without, I need to get these vertices out the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edge mode. I'm going to go to select, and I want to select sharp edges. And I'm going to use a trick that I've used on a previous video. I'm going to go to edge, and I'm going to mark seam. Now this is going to turn these a brighter orange color, and effectively this doesn't do anything of any note. We don't really use seams if you're doing this for 3D printing. It's generally something used for UV unwrapping, but it does mean that if I go into face mode, I can very quickly select a face, press L, and then all those faces inside that seam are selected. And now I can just press G and Z, and I'm going to just type in 10 minus and just bring all these points down there. And I know this looks really ugly, but what it means is that I can now affect these vertices and do a cut here without affecting this. And then I'm just going to shift this up because I just remember I've brought it down 10, I can put it up 10 if I want to. And the reason I did this method of adding in the seams is very quickly later on I can just come here and press L and it makes everything really quick and easy to select. So that's a nice little option. Object mode, and let's shift and D that. I'm going to press X to move that along. So we're going to do this, as I said, with and without add-ons that are paid for, and this first method is going to be the first time I use a paid for hard-on, and it's going to be box cutter. It comes with hard ops. It's fantastic. Go and buy it. I'm not sponsored by them, but we're actually not going to use the standard box cutter thing of pressing Alt and W and then I can make a box. There's a reason for that, and it's that we want a specific thickness of this trim. And actually this is going to be a little bit annoying doing it that way. So what in fact I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in a cube. So mesh and cube. I'm going to press S to make that bigger. So it's essentially bigger than the shoulder pad. And I need to get this trim so it's exactly 1 Blender unit. So in my instance, meters in size. And a quick way to do that is effectively just to manipulate the location of this object. So I'm going to go to edge mode, select that edge. I'm going to press Shift and S. And I'm going to move the object origin to that edge, so it's there. Go back into object mode, and now the location of this is, well, wherever that is, so down here. I'm going to press Ctrl and A to apply the scale, just because it's good form to do that, and then I'm going to move this around. So what I want is, I want this to go on my y-axis, 1 meter off of 0. Now I've got what's going to be a 1 unit trim, and in the Z I want it to go 1 as well. And now I've got this in the perfect position. Easy. Then I'm going to use hard ops. I've got this object selected, the cutter selected first. In fact, actually, I'm just going to copy this because notice we haven't done anything with an add-on yet. And I'm just going to move it in the x-axis so that it's next to this one so that I can do my alternative method here. But you'll notice move that a little bit this way. The positioning the cube did not require an add-on. It's just this bit. So here's where we're using hard ops, selecting the cutter first, then the object I want to cut, Q, booleans, and I'm going to do an inset. So we've now got this inset being done. I am going to need to make sure that this is the correct thickness. We want this half a Blender unit in size. So I'm going to come here, modifiers, go to my boolean. In actual fact, I need to do it to this one. This is one of the odd things with the inset. You do it on this part. And at the moment, the thickness is actually 0.5 meters. So at the moment, we've got a problem in that this isn't 0.5 thick. This whole offset here from, we can see this shell to that shell, that's 0.5, which means that's, well, 0.25. So I'm actually going to have to up this thickness to 1, which means that now that's whole thing is 1, so that's half, so 0.5, that's 0.5. So we need to leave it as that. So just one little trick here with this that can be a bit of a pain. So just something to pay attention to. I actually think my example that I showed in the example of this for the first video, the challenge video, actually had this wrong. Bad me, and actually luckily someone pointed it out, so well done for them for spotting that. So I'm going to hide that, and we've got our trim to the correct thickness. And now before we do anything, we need to apply this. So apply all, and then face mode. I've got all those selected, but if not, I go to it, press L with my mouse over it, and it selects everything, and then G and Z and 10 up. And then we've got this done. Now, this becomes a little bit more painful if you do not use hard ops. It's just a fact of life, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use ball tool. So if you don't have this, edit, preferences, and if not, why not? I use it in loads of videos. Go back and watch my videos. Come on, guys. So just type in ball, and you've got this option called ball tools. So just click that. Once you've got that, same thing. Click the cutter first, click the object you want to cut, and this time object, ball tool, you can press shift, control and B, and I'm going to slice. And we're going to have to apply that. And I'm going to have to apply that there. And then let's hide this. Sorry, should have mentioned this. This doesn't like applying things to two different things at the same time. At the moment, I've got one cutter that's cutting two objects. It doesn't like it, and Blender gets confused, which is why if I try to apply this, it says at the bottom, nope, not going to let you do that. This is a really simple fix. You come down here to Object Data Properties, but when we come here, it says, or it has here a 2. What this means is there is something being shared with another object. Well, that's the object that it's sharing the cutter with. And all I do is click on that, and then it says, no, you can treat this as separate things. And then I can come back here to my modifiers, apply it there, and apply it there. And now we've got one bit here, and the other bit there. And all we need to do is come in here, and we're going to change the dimensions. Now, we want this to go half either side, so 0.5. This is going to get a little bit complicated, so actually we do need to fix something. So I'm going to come into isolated mode, and you'll notice that my origin is not on this edge, which is going to cause confusion. If I, for example, change my Z, it's not going to do things evenly. It's going to try and do it from there. So I do need to go into edge mode, select that edge, and then Shift and S and move it to that edge. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. Now, when I do that, that does seem to have an odd effect. And to be fair, I know why. It's to do with the normals of this edge. And this is going to cause some problems with what we're going to do here, because we're going to fiddle around with this information. Now, what you'll notice is if I come to here, obviously I want to make the Z, I want to contract it down 0.5 to make this smaller. But if I go here and make that 0.5 smaller, so there, it messes with everything. We don't like that, and that's because this rotation hasn't been set, and that's a problem with moving your origin point to an edge. Sometimes it affects the rotation, so we're just going to Shift and A, apply the rotation, and now I should be able to go here, and you'll notice it has changed all these units because it's measuring it in a different way, and I want to go 0.5 smaller, which if I go minus 0.5, we've got that 0.5 smaller. We can do it if I just undo that. We can do this mathematically. Come here, minus 0.5, and it's done it for us. You don't need to do the maths in your head. Like, I'm sure you can, but why bother? I'm lazy. Why? We want to go 0.5 this way as well. So again, minus 0.5, done. And then on the x-axis, we've got to be careful because this one's actually contracting in both sides. So we need 0.5 off that side and 0.5 off that side. So in the x-axis, we need to actually just minus 1. Now, actually, I'm not that lazy. I can do that in my head. So we've got that there, / to come out of it, and then we've got this nicely done. A little bit longer than that, but not by much. It's perfectly doable. And we just need to join these together. So click the object we want to add, click the object we want to add it to, Control and plus on the number pad for ball tools. This is probably going to cause a problem if you haven't got this solver to be exact. So put it as exact. Let's have a look. As fast would work? It might work actually. Either way, I prefer exact. Select here, apply all, and let's hide that. And we've got this now as one solid object. Basically, it's exactly the same as this one at this point. Just took a little bit longer to get there, but not by much. And go into face mode, L to select it, G and Z, and 10 up. Oops, my bad. Ways to solve this. Let's go all the way back. Let's have a look at this. Let's isolate that. Make sure the ball's being activated. Isolate this. See, this is the problem when you don't have hard ops. To be fair, it's not that difficult to fix. So I'm going to go into face mode, select this face there. I'm going to G and Z it down just to bring it to there. In fact, actually, let's E to extrude it down. That should have a better result. Then I'm going to select this face there and that new one there. And I'm going to press E to extrude that out a little bit this way. Object mode. And then now, if I pile and H to hide that, hopefully that solved that issue. If not, we'll try something else. L, G and Z, 10, and we've got that problem solved. Okay, so we've just had to fiddle around a little bit to make sure we weren't what's called hotlining, which essentially was the faces were touching each other. I am going to click check all, and that's fine. 0 faces just means there's lots of small faces. That's no problem. So either way, a little bit long-winded, but as I said, you can do it with either, and we've got 2 of the same object at this point. So I'm just going to get rid of that just because we don't need it, and let's get going. So effectively, we've got the same object at this point. Now we're pretty much done. The only thing we need to do is this arrow. That's actually going to cause us some problems. This is where a lot of people go wrong. So let's make the arrow. Let's start with a plane. Always best to start with a plane with these things. It does make things a little bit easier, and things tend to go wrong less. So plane, and then I want to R on the x-axis by 90 to get it vertical, and G to move it somewhere like there, and let's start making this arrow. So we want it a bit bigger than that, so I'm going to just scale it up a little bit. I'm probably going to need to scale it later, and I'm going to go to edge mode, and I'm going to E and Z to extrude that up, somewhere like there, and I'm going to select the 2 edges, press E to extrude, escape, but the extruded edges are still there, S. So I'm scaling up those extruded edges, and X to confine them to the X, something like that. I'll fiddle around with this later. And then I'm going to go to edge mode. That edge and that edge don't want, so Control and X to dissolve them, but we've still got everything else. And then vertex mode, that one, and M and at center. So that's looking pretty good in terms of our arrow, but there is a problem here. Obviously, if I G and Z that, I can make it more or less pointed. I'm okay with that at the moment. But we do have a problem. This has not got quads on it. And normally I don't care about quads, but we're going to have to break down or make this have a lot more topology to get it to smooth over this face here. Otherwise, it's going to look horrible and angular. And to do that, we want to subdivide it, and to subdivide it, you want quads. And we've got a quad here, but this, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertexes doesn't make this a quad. So we're going to have to sort this out. Now, generally, the easiest way to do that is with a knife. So I'm going to come into side view, I'm going to press K, I'm going to select there, and I'm going to press Z to just go straight down, hit enter, and then K, I'm going to go there, 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 enter. And now we've got a quad for this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit. This one's the only one that isn't. So I'm going to go to edge mode, and I'm going to Control and X to dissolve that edge out. And now if I go into vertex mode, everything's a quad. This one's got 4, this one's got 4, that one's got 4, that one's got 4, that one's got 4. Some people don't like their quads being a triangle, and sometimes Blender gets a bit weird with it, so I'm actually going to select that one, G, and Z it down to about there. This is just personal preference. You can probably get away with it being up there, but I prefer it to be a bit like this. It's not going to make a difference to this in the end. And object mode, and we're going to need to subdivide it. So add modifier, subdivision surface. I've just realized that I haven't had my screencast keys on since I had to do something earlier. My apologies about that. I'm going to put those on now. Hopefully my verbal description has gone through everything. Now this is obviously a mess. We want to turn it to simple, and we're going to put up the levels. So 4. Now, if you want to see what you're doing here, because at the moment you can't, if you click off optimal display and come up here to your overlays and click wireframe, you can actually see what you're doing. So that's 3, that's 4. And what I generally go for is trying to make sure that this is roughly the same size as what it's going to. So actually 4 is probably going to be pretty good for this. Okay, these quads are relatively similar to that. And then I'm going to turn this off because I don't want that on all the time. So I'm going to apply that. Importantly, if I press N, I've been moving this around so the scale's all messed up. So Control A, apply the scale. And then I'm just going to put this onto this object. Now, let's talk through some problems. I'm going to Shift and D, move those along in the X, and I'm going to do this wrong. So let's start with doing this wrong. Now, there are several ways of doing this. In fact, Shift and D again, X, let's go through this. So the first thing we can do is we can do something called knife project. This works really well on an object that, let's say, is a cylinder, but as soon as you've got deformation in 2 axes or a curve in 2 axes, for example, it's curved this way and it's also curved this way, it's going to lead to problems. So let's go through how you do knife project anyway. It is a bit of fun and it is quite useful. So we want to be in the correct view. So we want to be here. I'm going to go to whatever, let's say face mode, of the object I want to be cut with my knife. Then I select, that's where I've done this wrong, I need to know what the plane is. So this is going to be our cutter. I'm going to rename that cutter just for ease. So here, face mode. Then I have to come over here and shift select cutter there, so it selects it within it. Then mesh, knife project, and then if I come to here, go to vertex mode, it's projected onto it. Cool! And it importantly does it from the direction you were looking, so I was looking here. So you'll notice it's done it exactly on that outline. And then I can go into face mode and I could notice it's got a slight issue here. There's been a bit of a problem with it. I mean, there's going to be more problems with it, but this wouldn't be too difficult to fix. For example, I could just go to, let's say, knife. In fact, the easier way to actually fix this would be to undo it. And let's do that again. So here, oops, that's G, and just turn it up a little bit. Notice that knife project is not something that you can change after the fact. It's not a modifier, it does it permanently. But either way, face, shift select that, mesh, knife project, go back into face mode, and then I could just come here, extrude region, and let's do that along the normals, and yay, I've got this done. Easy! And let's delete that. Except for, while this looks good from this angle, any other angle, you can actually see that this has got curves, and this isn't straight, and that's not very nice. It just doesn't work. That's because it's curved in 2 directions, and if I made this larger and it was on this more extreme bit, that's only going to get worse. So we don't want to use knife project for this. Similarly, we could use shrink wrap, which is actually what we're going to do, but we need to make sure we do it right. So here, I'm going to add a modifier. I'm going to go to shrink wrap, and I'm going to shrink wrap this to that. And it's going a little gammy because I've got it to the nearest surface. Most people automatically go to project, and this is going all right. It's looking okay, actually. I am going to expand this, so S to scale this up, and then G and Z to move it up. And again, you're going to notice it's looking all right, but we've still got this slight distortion, this curving here and there. So that's not actually the best way to do this, though it's probably a pretty good second option. And if I add another modifier here and solidify it, and let's go down to the solidify and change the thickness up, you can see it's not too bad, but it definitely still has these curves on it. So that's not quite the option. Now let's do this right. So it is basically correct. We are going to use a shrink wrap modifier. I am going to select this, but instead of changing it to nearest surface, I'm going to change it to target normal. I'm going to G and Z that up so it's fixed, and I'm going to scale it up a bit. So something about there. But you'll notice this is looking pretty horrible. So let me just go and explain what this is doing. If I go into face mode, and you can see the object here, what this is trying to do is this is basically putting it onto this via its tangents or its normal direction. And essentially it's sort of trying to do it straight. It's basically doing the same thing here. But what we can do to fix this is if I go back into object mode. Now bear in mind, while it looks like it's here, it's actually here. If I try to turn this so it's more at the correct angle to be almost at a tangent to this circle or this curve, it's going to give a much better result. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to rotate this here on the x-axis. Along the red line is the direction we want to rotate this. Effectively, I want to go to R and X and start doing that to curve it towards this point here. Now, I'm going to undo that so I can show you what it looks like as it's happening. So if I just come here, R and X, and start moving it, you'll notice I start to deform it by making it worse, or I'm going to have to shrink that a little bit smaller. But R and X, I can now manipulate this until I get it to the point where, look, that's the extreme opposite. If I actually do this and then come back here so you can see it, it's again too far, it's not at a tangent. R and X, and if I get it right, let's have a look. No, not there, R and X, so it's just a bit of trial and error to about, that looks pretty good. Something about there. And if I come out of this and see it here, you'll notice that's a pretty good tangent with where we're trying to attach it to. So you can do this beforehand, but I just find it easy to do it while you can see it. Now at this point we want to solidify it, but you can see this weird artifacting that's going on here. That's because these are literally on top of each other, and if I was to try and boolean these together, this is going to cause a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the offset to make it a minus. And at this point, I'm going to do it probably a little bit, something like minus 0.5. At this point, this is now inside the object, okay? Which means that while I can see it here, I couldn't see it if I went out of it. If I go select off of this, it's inside. I'm just going to bring that back so I look at it. If I add my solidify, up the thickness of that to somewhere about, yeah, there's probably about right. I mean, I can still scale this up if I want to. G and Z. If I do that, I might have to fix it. Okay, either way, I can fiddle around with it. And I do want to then, or I should, Control and A and apply the scale. I mean, that's not too important, but you'll notice it does fix the thickness. So, for example, that's now the correct thickness, so I can bring that out to about 0. Whatever I want it to be. Essentially the same thickness as that if I want. Let's apply all of those, and that to that, Control and plus, H to hide that, apply all, and we're done. Nice, easy shoulder pad with our arrow on it, or tactical markings. We could have moved that up and down if we wanted to. There we go, sorted. So hopefully there's been some techniques there that you've found useful. Obviously we've gone through a lot of additional bits with or without hard ops, and we've looked at some of the problems you can get with making an object on this very curved or curved in two different directions. As always, if you had a better way of doing this or a different add-on that you used, I'd love to hear about it. It's always really interesting to find out about new things. And if you've got any comments, especially if it is a better way of doing it, do let me know. Always happy to hear that about the things that I'm still probably doing wrong, because we're all still learning.